Hello, welcome to Challenging Leadership. I'm Stephen.
Hi, Stephen. I'm Jared.
Right. Well, Jared, it's your topic today, so
It
I'll
is.
let you lead this conversation. So tell us what you want to talk.
Absolutely. I wanted to talk about terrible mistakes that we can make as leaders that um, I call them the death knell. They're going to absolutely destroy your credibility. But what I'm not talking about, or what we're not going to talk about, is like very scandalous. You've got to go to HR and somebody's getting fired and there's a lawsuit. That's a whole different problem
That is a
that we're
different
not going
problem.
to address. But we
Okay.
are going to talk about, what are the things out there that we can do as leaders that absolutely destroy the continuity of our team, can destroy the morale and actually the success that we are supposed to be achieving, whether it's we're leading a company or even ourselves. So there's a
Okay.
lot of things to think about. But I thought I would start out with, I remember many years ago, me and some of my coworkers were at a big conference, and we had worked tirelessly on a project. I'm talking, I think we put in probably 90 hours sometimes in a week. And
Wow.
this was insane. This was really burning the candle at both ends.
Mm.
And then they had this moment up on the platform as they were going through the different things, and we were just so excited because everything was going off without a hitch, and it was really, we were the ones that made this possible. And you have the Grammys or the Oscars, and the person gets their award. Well, the person who got the award, they made sure to thank a lot of people, but there was crickets when it came to the people that actually did the work. And it was so notable. Even people in the audience were like, we actually know who did this. Like afterwards we're having beers and like, man, he says, I hate that for you. And it was so funny. And looking back on it, that it was such a small thing, but it was a huge thing,
Mm.
because the thing wasn't, hey, we're asking for huge bonuses. It was just more of just like, hey, could you just
Mm.
acknowledge us?
Yeah.
And instead the credit was taken by somebody else. And so that's kind of where I wanted to start with, is
Okay.
just how dangerous it can be, um, when a leader claims that an idea was theirs,
Mm.
or the success that we have is because of them. And sure, they a leader does have a lot of reasons to say, yeah, I'm the reason why
Mm.
this is successful, but
Yeah.
you were successful because of your team in most cases. So it's actually, Harvard Business Review said 47% of employees said that the manager taking credit for their work was one of the most demoralizing experiences in their careers. And I was like, well, I can agree with that.
Mm.
So it's tough, because I think people are always fighting for more than just the pizza party, and and you're not asking for something that the person doesn't have the ability to do.
Yeah.
It's just a simple acknowledgement. So
Yeah.
that's
That's
where I'm
very
at.
interesting. Yeah, it reminded me. I need to look it up properly, so I'm just off the top of my head now. So forgive me if I got the details wrong, but it reminds me of a discovery going back many years, 50 years or so, of an astronomical body called a pulsar. You've probably heard of it, a
Hmm.
pulsar, and it was first discovered in one of the UK astronomical um, observatories, and it was kind of a really big thing because it was very, it was like clockwork, and it first of
Hmm.
all, it seemed like, I think they wrote by the side of it, LGM for Little Green Men, because it seemed like but obviously they were scientists, they weren't going to jump to that
Hmm.
conclusion. But anyway, a
Yeah.
lot of research was done, but this particular woman, this researcher, part of the team that was looking for various different astronomical events, she was the first one to ever spot a pulsar, and she did a lot of work on it and everything. But she, in the history books now, she doesn't get any credit because
Mm.
that the guy that was kind of the overall academic over the whole of the department, he took all the credit for it, and so on. So yeah, that was kind of became a bit of a scandal.
Mm.
Yeah, that must be quite, it must be very upsetting. But I guess part of the problem is that you kind of want to be bigger than getting worried about it. So is it you're in a kind of difficult emotional
Mhm.
place because you feel like you've been slighted and undermined, but on the other hand, you don't want to sound as though
Yeah.
you're trying to, oh, it's such an important thing that I get the credit for this. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, it's such a balance. I get what
Yeah,
you're saying. It's like almost, why is it such a big deal?
that's
You
right.
know?
Yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah.
but that's kind of a thing in its way. I think when leaders minimize
Mm,
their employees, however
yeah.
form that takes, it can come in other forms as well. But I I'll tell you what, I think I just put that at the top of the list because I feel
Mm,
like it's going to create feelings that you don't even know are happening. It's almost
mm,
like a house that has some rot going on in the foundation and everything looks great because it's got a fresh coat of paint on it, and then
yeah.
all of a sudden now you've got a floor that's sagging or cracks in your walls.
Mm.
It's going to cause other problems. It's not like an initial shock to the system that's going to be able to be noticed immediately. So
Yeah,
that's something that can
I think that's
happen.
right, and I think it also encourages passive aggressive behaviour in your team. So, passive aggressive behaviour is that sort of behaviour where it's not like your team are rebelling against you, but they're just withdrawing some of their goodwill and withdrawing some of that extra mile that they might go otherwise. And
Hmm.
there's probably going to be a few comments behind your back, and so you start to get a very kind of passive aggressive type behavior from the team. So that's
Yeah,
another problem with that sort of thing.
sure, it is, and the opposite end of the spectrum, instead of giving credit, you give them credit in a bad way, like you blame others to save face. And I'm sure we can think of many notable instances where that happened, but one that I thought about was the Boeing 737 Max issue.
Mm.
It's funny; those are actually built right down the road from me. Well, I say right down the road, but it's probably a 3 hour drive. But hey, that's just right down the road in
One side of the country to the other,
America.
of course.
Yeah, yeah, and but it was like they said, oh, the pilots don't know what they're doing, and they blamed the
Yeah.
pilots,
Mm.
and there was much more involved than that. And so
Mm.
that initial knee jerk reaction when you're facing the heat from somebody that's over you, you say, well, it's not me, it's so and so, they did this or whatever. And I've always detested that because I've even seen as myself, it's like, well, the person that you're leading may have done that, but you allowed it to happen as a leader. It's kind of like in the military, the captain of the ship is ultimately responsible
Mm.
for the crew.
Yeah.
And that's true in the sci-fi world of Star Trek. It's anywhere. It's just
It
something
is,
that's kind
and
of commonplace.
absolutely. I mean, we talked about old Ted Lasso in a previous
Yeah,
episode, and you see that with managers of sports teams. I think the good ones really do draw all the criticism to themselves, and
hmm,
whilst they, in the dressing room, they may well be, very blunt about the performance of the team, but to the rest of the public and the fans, look, talk to me. It's my fault. I picked the team. These are my players, so the book stops with me. And they're the best managers, I think, who take that on.
yeah, yeah. I say, who's the heat shield in your
Yeah.
situation? Is the leader
Mm.
being the heat shield and taking all of the missiles that are fired at them, or
Yeah.
is it them hiding behind the front row of their workers or their team?
Yeah.
Yeah, and sports analogy is great because you've probably seen that as well in real life, where it's the team's fault or it's my fault.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
you can hear that when it comes to that. But it's interesting because of the fact that um, I feel like these points build on each other
Mm.
because you've got okay, I'm going to take credit or I'm going to blame, and then you got others that are just like I'm just not going to bring up this problem and it'll go away, and they just allow problems to persist. There's that age old quote about like nothing destroys a good employee's morale than the toleration of a bad employee.
Yeah.
You could expound on that all day long, but I think the danger zone is when we think that, oh, it's not really a big deal, or we're
Mm.
dismissive of an employee that brings up a problem. Hey, I noticed this, and that happens in a toxic culture.
Mm.
Or I'm sure there were people that were noticing things way back with Enron, and they were saying, they were like, and there was, oh, don't worry about that. Just keep doing your job, and you see what
Yeah.
happened there.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a couple of ways that can go down. I think one is sometimes we talk about laissez-faire managers or leaders, and these are managers who basically want to just let things go on without them having to do much intervention. So this is a very hands-off type of leadership. And I think during different times of your team's development, you can step back a bit more, and then other times you need to be more hands-on. But the real extreme laissez-faire sort of approach that generates quite a lot of this sort of thing where things just drift and issues don't get picked up and they become the norm.
Hmm.
So that's another, I suppose, another example of that sort of thing. Okay, so you
Yeah.
said you had about five of these, Jared.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I'm going to give you the fourth one if you're
Okay,
keeping count.
all right.
But this one, this one's really a bothersome one. Publicly supporting someone while privately undermining them. And I don't know if you've ever seen that, or maybe you've been privy to seeing this in action, but it's really bad because of the fact that people know when somebody doesn't like somebody, and then you see them get in front of a crowd, and old Jim or whoever you
Mm,
want to call is
mm.
doing such a splendid job, and then behind their back or over a few pints, they're just wearing them out. There's nothing good that he can say about Jim or whoever this may be, and it's praising you in meetings but undercutting you behind closed doors
Mm.
can be really tough. And it may not even be cutting remarks. It could just be you're showing outward support, but then behind the scenes you're not facilitating them with the resources that they need to be successful.
Yeah.
It's almost like there's a picture I saw of a big hole in the ground, and there's a guy trying to reach up to get out of the hole, and there's the leader. He's reaching down, and he's like, "I'm sorry, I can't help you." And next to him, where it's out of sight, is a ladder.
Yeah.
And that really illustrates it's like, as leaders, and I've learned this, we have so many resources and abilities at our disposal. It's really purposeful when you don't help somebody. It's
Mm.
almost like an industrial sabotage
Yeah.
on a level.
Yeah. If I could just sort of add to that, I think generally, I guess we're all critical of other people from time to time, and that there
Hmm.
are times when, I guess, you need a bit of an offload. Jared, can I just have a quick word? I just want to talk about this issue I've been having this week with such and such. And I don't quite know how to deal with it.
Hmm.
Um, and it's I suppose it can still be productive in that I'm actually looking for some advice and some help, or at least somebody to talk to so I can get my thoughts together. I think that's different though to the just constant bitching and moaning about other people in your team. It's something I hate to see as from leaders. So whenever I
Hmm.
go into a business and um, again, I'm not talking here about managers who want to talk to me about a problem they've got or an issue they've got with a team member that they need a bit of help with. And they're talking about that. That's not what I'm talking about here. It's just a general. If you hear a kind of general dismissal of the team in general, and they've got nothing good to
Mm.
say about them, um, I think that's a bit of a red flag, to use a common meme. It
Yeah.
it says to me something that, and often it's a it's a bit of a flag that they might be quite autocratic in their
Mm.
leadership because they want everything done exactly the way they want it to be done, and if anybody that doesn't meet that
Yeah.
criteria is rubbish and they just they have nothing good to say about them. So I think that's something to avoid. It's easy to get into that mindset where you're sort of frustrated with people not doing what you're asking them to do, you don't know what to do, um, and so it's easy then to just dismiss it and think, well, they're just useless, what a waste of
Yeah.
time they are. um, but I think that says something about us as a leader and a manager if we get to that point.
Hmm. Yeah. It's like a cascading effect of these little things turn into the ultimate situation where
Mm.
you are doing that sort of behavior. And And then it leads to what I'll call my fifth point: breaking
Mm.
promises, no matter how small. How many times have you heard the leader say, "I'll take care of that. No worries, I've got that." And then it puts an awkward
Mm.
strain on a relationship between a leader and who they're leading, because you don't, the worst thing ever is to keep going to your boss and saying, "Hey, remember this?" And then all of a sudden now
Mm.
you become this what do they call the little small gnats, the no-see-ums, or the little bitty mosquitoes
Ah, yeah,
that
yeah.
annoy and fly
Mm.
around, and
Mm.
those are like little mosquitoes. And then the manager's all upset because they keep coming to this, and I'm like, well, they're coming to you because you never did what you said you were going to
Yeah,
do.
yeah.
And most people hang on words. When you say you're going to do something, like it starts in childhood, you tell your parents, "Yep, I'm going to take care of the trash. I'm going to put it out at the bin," or "You've got to cut the grass," and
Mm.
they expect that rather quickly, not just sitting on the couch and continuing to watch TV. And that
Yeah.
behavior translates into some problems in the workplace, and especially because it can be just, I say, little things turn into big things,
Mm.
but it devalues people when
Yeah.
you say you're going to do something and you're not. And ultimately, I feel like it's a lack of communication when things come up where you realize, oh, I can't do what I said I was going to do. The onus is on you to say, hey, listen, I know we talked about this. We said we're going to do this, but here's why we're not able to do it right
Mm.
now.
Mm.
I think most times people can handle
Yeah.
disappointments, but you just have to
Mm.
tell them the why. Otherwise, the brain goes off into worst case scenarios,
Mm.
or it devalues or takes away the credibility of the leader. And so
Yeah.
then you have that issue. I mean, it could be something as simple as I have a site here. Hope we can keep this in here. We don't have to edit this out, but I'm going to mention Elon Musk in a negative
Yeah.
light.
Yeah.
But
Well,
he
I'll join you on that one.
yeah, he promised Tesla employees in 2018, it's on record, they'd receive bonuses if production targets were met. When the targets were hit, the bonuses never materialized,
Mm.
and it created a tremendous backlash through the entire organization. And again, whatever target or goal that we set for our employees, if we say, if X is accomplished,
Yeah.
then here's what's going to be the result.
Mm.
You really have to follow through with that one, because the
Yeah.
next time you ask, you're not going to get the support.
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't know much about that case. So we should say that that Tesla probably would deny that that happened in that way.
Yeah,
But yeah, I think as a principle that that's really, yeah, that's a big problem, isn't it? You lose your credibility. Yes, promise and deliver. And I
hmm,
like your point. If you can't deliver, then come up front about it. An apology is appropriate at that moment, I believe. Not a groveling apology. I'm not saying we have to grovel,
no,
but look, um, I know we promised you this. I promised you this, and I still want to deliver on it. But unfortunately, this has happened, which means that I'm not able to do it. I'm really
yeah,
sorry.
yep,
I'm sorry that I
yep,
wasn't able to deliver on that promise. Um, it's bad, but it's
hmm,
better than just pretending that you never said it. So yeah, totally agree with that one.
that's
Yeah,
right.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, uh, at the end of the day, I mean, I don't know any of us. We're not going to argue with something if it's brought to us. This is just how it is. It's very
yeah.
factual.
Mm.
But when we're given that ambiguity or there's cloudiness to what's going on, then we're going to go where we want to go with things. And then you've got how many other people that are going to do that as well. And so, yeah, that complete transparency to me is one of the things that you can do to solve some of these problems we've talked about that can be real deal breakers when
Yeah.
it comes to destroying your credibility. But the one thing that I didn't bring out is we all know the old favoritism problem, and that kind of falls into any of these. You probably seen the I call it we call it brown nosing. I don't know
Yeah.
what maybe
Yeah,
the slang is
I know what that
there.
means. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the actually my favorite use of that type of term is in German. They have a phrase where they say Ashkrika, and it's it's in a crude way, it's
Mm.
basically someone that's like, very close to the rear, but they're a
Yes.
snake.
Yeah. Yeah.
and, and it's like you have all these people around here, but then if you watch a leader who actually enjoys that admiration, oh my goodness, it totally destroys so many networks of communication because
Mm.
now people, what do? You say, oh, don't say anything to Joe over there because he's got a direct pipeline to the
Mm.
boss, and
Yeah.
and so then you see that, and you can tell a lot about someone's values by their inner circle of friends.
Mm.
You know absolutely what type of leader they are by the type of people that they associate with.
Yeah.
And we've seen that in so many different ways. It's how people their integrity. Integrity is another one. It's I see these small things become big things. I remember we had a health competition at work, and it was based on like how many steps you got.
Okay. Yeah.
Yep, and it's like, so 10,000 steps a day is what you're trying to average, and somebody out there was like tripling everybody else's. So when you see this outlier, everybody's scratching their head, and the watch may or may not have been tied around the collar of an animal, and everybody's like, "Why would you do that? You
Mm.
literally like, I think you got a $20 gift certificate or something." It's
I
like,
know.
why would you do that? And so
Yeah.
you know what it does is now you're like, well, if they'll do that,
Mm.
what about everything else?
Yeah. That's
And
true.
that's just human nature, right? When you see one
Mm.
little thing,
Mm.
you could have a problem, a very small problem with your car. Now you're like, my car's it's rubbish. I'm trading it in, and it could be such a small thing, but it's like you feel betrayed by things when people make small things. So I don't know. I don't know what you think about that. How impactful it can be when we don't show integrity even in the small things as leaders.
Yeah, I think that's right. Nobody's perfect, so we all forget things, we get things wrong. But yeah, it's that. I suppose I'd lump that in with this a highly political person. I would describe them as, and I've always been rubbish at politics, work politics. I don't seem to have the right personality for it. I tend to say what I think. And that doesn't always go down particularly well. So I find it difficult to be a brown nose because I'm the first one to be there criticizing if I think it is appropriate. So yeah,
Yeah.
I've never been very good at that sort of politicking type
Hmm.
thing, that Machiavellian sort of you know. Some people are great at it and really know how to play the game, but I'm pretty rubbish at that.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think maybe I don't want to be good at that either. But yeah, that's when you get this tell one person one thing and somebody else something
Hmm.
else, so that
Hmm.
you remain in the good graces of who you think is the powerful one at the time. Yeah, I guess there is some benefit to that. It does help people to get up the corporate ladder. um, I would suggest, though, that it comes at a cost to your
Yes.
own sort of credibility. And yeah, who are you
That's
really if you
right.
do that?
That's right. That's right. I thought about that. Like, if a manager is not disliked by at least some, then
Yes.
maybe they're not a good manager.
Yeah.
And it's like you can't be liked by everybody. I forget who said the quote, but this is many years ago. Somebody said that, "Do you have enemies? Good. It means you're doing something right." And
Yeah.
you got to stand this wishy-washy,
Yeah.
want to make everybody happy and people pleasing. It can be good, but it's very detrimental in so many different ways
Yeah.
when it
So
comes to that.
it's really interesting. I mean, maybe this is a topic for a whole different episode, but
Sure.
I think over the years I've tried to be more willing to listen and to accept that I might be wrong. And I guess as I get older, I've become more, centrist dad sort of character,
Mm,
which
mm.
I guess that happens to a lot of us. We mellow, don't we? But I feel like I did that as a response to a piece of behavior that wasn't necessarily helping me. I may have talked about this before. I talk to my learners in my course about this, that I was a sort of person that would become very angry or emotional and say things sometimes that that would offend, and it got in my way. As a leader, as a manager, it got in my way, and it got in my way as somebody that wanted to progress. So I just happened to go on a training course about assertive behavior, which is something I train now, and that was such a revelation for me. It was okay, you don't have to accept everything, but there is a way to do it. So you
Hmm.
assertively can disagree. You can be very clear about your disagreement. You can put your point of view forward, but it's the way you do it. It's how you do it. And there's some very basic techniques to that. And I learned how to do that. So I feel like I've really gone on a journey there. Um, so yeah, every now and again, though, I think I have to question myself: am I where I need to be? When I need to say
Hmm.
something, am I still that person that will? Do you know what? This is a bit of a problem, and it's particularly important, I think, in my position as a consultant that will go into another business. Um, they're looking for me to be honest and to flag up issues and actually say things
Hmm.
as I see them. Um, and that is one of the reasons they're paying for somebody external to come in, isn't it? To
Yeah.
have that perspective. So if I don't do that, then I'm really shortchanging them. So I've had to find a sort of balance there. Yes, do it politely, do it assertively, not aggressively, but still be willing to, I suppose, challenge the status quo or challenge what's happening.
Yeah, absolutely. There has to be a balance between uh, who's the famous chef that makes sure to let people know when he's very
Gordon
displeased
Ramsay,
with.
you're thinking of?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
I was looking for the word and I was like, I know this guy, but I
yeah.
was like, we don't have to be Gordon Ramsay blunt, but we
Yeah,
can.
I use him in my courses,
Yeah.
and actually, if I read his well, he's got two autobiographies. I read both of them quite some time ago, and what's interesting is that he, in kitchens during the sort of 70s, 80s, 90s, even a lot of these places were very abusive, really awful. He trained in
Mhm.
France and various other places that where they really know how to cook,
Mhm.
but the behavior of these chefs was just absolutely appalling. So he kind of learned.
Mm.
I mean,
Mm.
clearly he's got his own challenges with temper, but he also learned how to do it and learned this bad behavior. So
Yeah.
that's one of the things that we talk about.
Yeah.
Often this sort of behavior is learned behavior
Mhm.
as well as being natural.
Maybe it's put on a little bit too with being in
I think
front of the
these days it
camera,
is. It's
but
part of his
yeah,
brand, isn't
yeah.
it? Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
But it's funny we're focusing on this one because I think that's actually one of the things that's not a we'll call it something that destroys you as a leader, and that's being
Mm.
blunt.
Mm.
You have to be blunt sometimes. And I imagine if if I may use a lesson that I learned was I was in Manchester and I looked the wrong way before crossing the street.
This is Manchester, England, is it?
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
absolutely. And
Yeah.
the gentleman that was with me, he literally he grabbed my jacket and just yanked me. And I could have you could have taken offense to it, but it was no, I wasn't offended. I was like, thanks for saving my life because the bus
Yeah.
would have taken the side of my head off because I wasn't looking the right way because I'm used to looking the other way.
Yeah.
And I'm like, we have to make those type of decisions sometimes where you have to be blunt. You have to get people to course correct. And I say that sometimes blunt. We live. I don't want to. Make it like this is just how it is, but people have a hard time, I think, dealing with that because they
Mm.
don't know how to be blunt but also do it in a controlled way.
Yeah.
People either it comes through as anger and they're not in control of their emotions, which shows a lack of emotional intelligence, or they go to the other side where they're sugarcoating it so much. Like, can you imagine?
Yeah.
He's like, hey Jared, watch out! There's a bus coming. You need to look the
Yeah.
other way. I know you're used to. He didn't have time to give me a
No, that's not
diatribe
right.
of of
So what's
things.
your excuse me? What's your uh, what's your thoughts on the feedback sandwich? So this is something that's been around a long time,
It's
and
disgusting.
you're not into the feedback sandwich. So
It's as
I
bad
think
as
you mentioned
Vegemite. No.
I think you mentioned it in your book, actually. I think you mentioned it in
Yeah,
your book, and it's one of the areas that I wanted to challenge you a little bit on.
sure.
Um, now, just remind us about the feedback sandwich and what you think about it.
How you doing today, Stephen? It's good to see you. I really like your glasses. By the way, I think you could speak up a little bit more. You're kind of not talking so much. That's great, right? So anyway, how's the wife and kid? And
Yeah,
you haven't doing it, and I just
yeah,
hit you with an avalanche of information. And
yeah.
what was the part you were supposed to work on?
Yeah. So the idea of the feedback sandwich is you give somebody something good, so some praise, and then the meat of the sandwich is the sort of counsel, if you like, the thing you want them
Yeah,
to change, and then you finish it off with another bit of praise. And the problem with that, I think you talk about in your book, is that the person doesn't really know what the message was. It's all
yeah.
confused. Is it a problem? Is it not a problem?
Yeah.
And I totally agree with that. But I think the only time where I would so I think there are times when that approach can work with some skill. So let's say I give you a task to do. Let's say I delegate a task to you. So it is
Hmm.
actually my job, and maybe it's going to a review meeting or something that I would normally do, but I'm going to be away next week, and I've delegated for you to go to that meeting. Or let's say it's a report or something like that. I'm asking you to do. When you finish that activity, that report or that meeting, I need to give you some feedback. So I need to say to you, first of all, thanks for doing that for me, or thanks for doing that job. Um, Now at that point, I think it's quite legitimate to say, I thought the way you handled that issue there was great. That's exactly what we want to see. Um, Now the bit I want you to concentrate on for next time is
Hmm.
this, and actually
Yeah.
that's something for next time you need to change the way you're doing that, or this is something I'd like you to change in the way you're doing that. It'll be much more effective if you do this instead of that. So
Hmm.
um, let's get together before I delegate it again, and I'll give you a bit of sort of guidance and training on that, so that we can get the results we're looking for. So for me, that's a kind of variance of the feedback sandwich, but it's
Hmm.
still very
That's a
clear.
delicious sandwich the way you did
I
that.
think so. I think so. So I think and also I would say like an appraisal or a performance review, you do
Hmm.
want to have some positive stuff in there if you can. I'm a big fan of not
Yeah.
lying. So if they are complete
Yes.
and utter disaster, then no feedback sandwich for you.
Yeah.
But if there is something you can say, even if it's thanks for the effort or thanks for working hard on that, and you're giving some very specific feedback, then I think it can be used with skill.
Hmm.
But I totally take your point on board that if it's just a
No.
kind of very very unfocused conversation
Yeah.
where you feel the need to be
Or it's
nice.
inauthentic. It's not.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's
Yeah. Yeah.
so yeah.
Mhm.
I would say maybe the sandwich only needs one slice of bread. It's an open
Yeah.
face.
Yeah.
You got a compliment and then a point to work on, and there's no need to close it up with another slice of bread. It's
Yeah.
just
Unless
you just got
you
to know what works for each situation.
Well, that's true. Unless I mean, for me, I always say that the other piece of bread is the way forward. So let's
Yeah,
agree on a way forward.
sure.
Before you do it next time, let's get together. Or this is an area I'd like you to improve. Let's think about how you can improve your performance in that area. Then for me,
Hmm.
that's the other bit. So it doesn't have to be but your hair looks nice today or something like
Yeah.
that. It's something about the thing you've been talking about. So yeah, good.
Yeah.
I'm glad we got to
No.
talk about that because I
Yeah,
noticed.
no, I'm glad. Thanks for the plug on my book too.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
But that goes into just two other quick things
yeah,
related to things that can seem like big mistakes, but they're not. Is admitting you don't have all the answers. I don't know anybody that's ever said, I really don't know the answer to that. I'm gonna get to the bottom of this though, and they do. Where
Mm,
you go, wow, that dummy, he doesn't know anything.
yeah.
You don't say that about people
Mm,
that are willing to admit. However, we all know people who just never admit they don't know,
yeah.
and they just throw some line of garbage out at you
Mm,
that's is totally wrong,
yeah.
but they just can't handle not knowing or admitting they don't know.
Mm,
And it's so true. A leader who pretends to know everything comes across as less credible
yeah.
pretty much every time. And then on top of that, you've got those that make decisions that are wrong. We're never going to be perfect, especially as
Mm,
leaders. We've got a spotlight on us,
yeah.
and I think people are willing to forgive mistakes if there's an admittance. Hey, you know
Mm,
what? That didn't work the way I thought it was going to do. Let's try this instead.
yeah.
And there's an opportunity to bring in the ideas that your team has. What better way to show that you're willing to listen than to say, "Hey, the idea I had was terrible. Let's try your idea." They People forgive mistakes, but they don't forgive leaders who refuse to own them, and
Yeah.
that's
Totally agree
that's
with that.
that's a struggle.
Okay, let's so the first point you made there, which was the admitting that you don't know. So it's
Hmm.
okay for a manager, for a leader to say, actually, that's a question I don't know the answer to that. Either I need to go and find out some information, or let me think about that, because that's the other
Hmm.
thing that I've found really useful is to be able to say, that's a really interesting question. I need to go and think about that. Um,
Yeah,
and I've rarely found that, if ever, that anybody's found that to be a problem. That's okay, that's
yeah,
fine. And
yeah.
it can also reduce some of the tension around the issue if it's a slightly contentious issue.
Hmm.
Um, it's just it can be a bit of a stopgap, but you're genuinely going to go away and think about it and come up with I suppose, a philosophy or a policy or whatever it is that you're thinking about. But at what point does that? I think there is a point at which, as a manager, you you can damage your credibility if everything is, yeah, I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah.
I need to find out about that. So, I mean, there isn't an exact. It's not an exact science. There isn't a number, but I
No.
guess there's a point at which it would start to damage our credibility if we don't know any of the answers. Um,
100%.
and that
Yeah.
can be difficult when we first start a new job as a manager, because often when we start a new role, we've been brought in as a manager, but we're leading a team who actually know far more than us about things. So there's a bit of a process there, I think, where you as a leader and a manager, you can get away with a bit of that, and it's good because
Hmm.
it demonstrates your humility and your willingness to learn. But at some point, I think there's a need to reduce the amount that you're doing that. I don't know what you think.
No, I'd agree with that wholeheartedly. I was just thinking about in sports, if the team is wanting to run up a play they know is really good, but every time the coach is like, "Yep, let's do that. What do you boys think?" And
Yeah.
he never offers any input, and it's like, no, we're coaching, we're leading, we have to be able to direct people,
Yeah.
and it goes back to the other one. It's like if you do direct people and it ends up being maybe not the best direction, then it's an opportunity to clean it up a bit for the next time.
Yeah.
Hey, that's what we were trying to accomplish. It didn't go so well. What if we do this and this? You're
Yeah.
constantly giving guidance. There's always feedback and there's always communication. And
Mm,
that communication to me is super key, because silence on the part of a leader communicates something else, and it's not
mm.
usually good.
Yeah. Yeah.
So even we'll call it the silent treatment. That may work in dysfunctional families, but you can't do that in the workplace,
Yeah.
because it's your job to tell people, hey, I'm not very pleased with that behavior or that action, and we need to work
Mm.
on that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Blunt. Um, yeah,
Cool.
and then yeah, so that goes
Yeah.
with everything. But I think the bottom line is, if we wanted to wrap it up,
Mm.
is that we never want to minimize issues. That I think anything can become a big issue depending on your team, the season that you're in, what it is you're faced with. There's so many moving parts, and I think that's what makes leadership so challenging. Is that you can't just have a one size fits all instruction manual for being a leader. But you start with being genuine. You start with being authentic, and remember that not everything is a bad thing, even if it's perceived that way, like being blunt or not knowing everything. So that's kind of my thoughts on it.
Okay, very good.
Don't be a dummy.
Okay, good. Well, very interesting. Thank you very much, Jared. Thank you for
Absolutely.
listening, everybody. Don't forget to like and subscribe and pass on the podcast. We are very interested in your thoughts about some of the topics we're talking about. Feel free to drop us a note on our YouTube channel or something like that, or let me or Jared know topics that you'd like to talk about, because actually we want to respond to your interests as listeners. So please do let us know. Great. Thank you very much. See you next time.
Yeah. We'll see you.
Bye.